In May 2025, 19 skulls arrive in New Orleans, packed in plain containers. Their surfaces dull, chalky, cool to the touch. 17 names follow them home. 2 do not. One label stands out. Catalog number 804. Samuel Prince, 40 years old, cook. Died December 20th, 1871. This is him, Dr. Eva Baham says quietly, tapping the paper, not the bone. For more than a century, Samuel existed as measurements and ink, his life reduced by Dr. Henry D. Schmidt to something shippable. I can't pretend I know what it felt like to be taken after death, but I can see the cost in what weighted recipes never cooked, a family line thinned to rumor. Celesta Prince grew up with that gap, learning that names can be stolen and returned, but never cleanly. Samuel Prince wakes before the sun, not because the day asks him to, but because his chest will not let him sleep past that hour anymore. The room is dim, the air heavy with last night's cooking smoke and river damp that seeps through the walls near Carondelet Street. He sits on the edge of the bed and waits for the coughing to pass, one hand braced against the mattress, the other already reaching for the folded cloth he keeps tucked into his pocket even at night. He coughs once, then again. He presses the cloth to his mouth and turns his head toward the window so no one passing in the hallway might hear. When he pulls it away, there is a faint rust-colored mark at the center. He folds the cloth tighter this time, hiding the stain inside, the way he's learned to do. "I'm fine," he murmurs to the empty room, as if repetition might make it true. Samuel's mornings follow a rhythm he trusts more than his body. He washes his face with cold water from a chipped basin, the shock making his eyes water. He sharpens his kitchen knife on a smooth stone he's owned longer than most friendships, the metal whispering as it slides back and forth. While water heats on the stove, he hums the same three-note melody, low and steady, a tune without a name. He learned it years ago, and now it rises without asking, as automatic as breathing when breathing cooperates. The smell of onions fills the room as he chops, careful, precise. Cooking is where his hands still listen to him. Even on the mornings when his legs feel hollow and his chest tightens without warning, the knife obeys. The pot responds. He tastes a spoonful of broth and closes his eyes. "Needs salt," he says, satisfied when the second taste tells him he's right. On the small table near the wall sits his notebook, the one tied with twine to keep the pages from loosening. The cover is darkened with grease and fingerprints. Inside are recipes written in careful handwriting, notes squeezed into margins. Less water if the onions are sweet. Beans first, then smoke. He flips to the back and adds a line he's been thinking about for weeks: how to stretch a stew when money is thin without letting anyone taste the difference. This is the future he imagines when the coughing eases. A stall near the river, hot bread wrapped in paper, bowls of stew sold by the ladle. People lining up not because they have to eat, but because they want what he makes. He pictures it clearly enough to feel it settle in his chest like a promise. Outside, the city is already moving. Horses clatter over stone. Someone calls out a price for fish. The air smells of wet wood and yesterday's rain. Samuel counts the coins in his pocket once, then again, then a third time, slower, hoping the number will change. It doesn't. He exhales, folds the coins back into place, and tucks the notebook under his arm. By mid-morning, the coughing returns harder. He leans against a wall near the kitchen door, breathing through his mouth, willing the dizziness to pass. That's when Lucien Baptiste finds him. Lucien is broader, louder, always smelling faintly of the river and rope. He trades dock gossip for leftovers and never pretends it's a fair exchange. "You look like hell," Lucien says, not unkindly. "You been sleeping?" "Some." Samuel lies. Lucien watches him for a moment, eyes narrowing. "You're shaking." "It's the heat," Samuel says. "Kitchen's always hot." Lucien doesn't argue, but he steps closer anyway. Years ago, on a day much like this, Samuel collapsed in the rain outside the docks, laughing even as Lucien hauled him upright. Best cook in the city, Lucien had joked then. Can't stand upright to save his life. Now, the memory sits between them, unspoken. Lucien lowers his voice. "You need a doctor." "I need rest," Samuel replies. "Couple nights. Fever breaks. I'll be back." Lucien frowns. "Charity Hospital." The words land heavy. Samuel knows what that place is for. He also knows what happens to men who don't go. I'm not dying in that bed, Samuel says, sharper than he intends. Then softer. I'm coming back to my stove. Lucien studies his face, the lines around Samuel's eyes, deeper than they were a year ago. Promise me, Lucien says. When you're well, you cook me that Sunday meal you keep bragging about. Samuel smiles despite himself. You'll complain no matter what I make. Still want it, Lucien says. I promise, Samuel answers. The word tastes strange in his mouth, but he lets it stay there. The walk to Charity Hospital is shorter than Samuel expects. Or maybe his sense of distance is failing along with other things. Each step feels like moving through thick water. He keeps his head down, the notebook pressed against his side, the cloth hidden in his pocket. He tells himself, this is temporary. Just a few nights. At the intake desk, a woman with tired eyes asks for his address. 140 Carondelet Street, Samuel says, clearly, making sure she hears him. She writes it down without looking up. Occupation? Cook. She nods, as if that explains something, and gestures for him to sit. The bench is cold through his clothes. The smell here is sharp disinfectant layered over sickness, sweat, and something metallic he can't place. He watches another man being helped down the hallway, his shoes dragging, and feels a flicker of fear he quickly pushes aside. A nurse approaches later, introducing herself as Delphine. Her voice is calm, practiced. She takes his pulse, listens to his chest, her brow tightening almost imperceptibly. You've been coughing blood, she says, not asking. Samuel hesitates, then nods. I didn't want to worry anyone. She meets his eyes. You should rest. We'll take care of you. He wants to ask what that means, exactly. Instead, he hands over his few belongings. The notebook, the knife, the cloth. Delphine places them together, careful, but without ceremony. You can have these back when you leave, she says. When, Samuel repeats, holding on to the word. The days blur. Fever comes and goes. Sometimes he dreams of the river, of steam rising from pots, of Lucien laughing with his mouth full. Sometimes he wakes to the sound of coughing from other beds, a rough chorus that never quite stops. He keeps his eyes closed more often now, saving energy. When he opens them, the light feels too bright. On the second night, he writes a note. The pencil shakes in his hand. He starts, stops, then tries again. The words feel weak on the page. Not at all like the man he believes himself to be. He folds the paper and tucks it into the notebook, unsent. He is ashamed of how much it sounds like a goodbye. I can't pretend I know what it felt like to lie there counting breaths, wondering if anyone would come, but I know the shape of that waiting. It settles into a person, quiet and heavy, changing how they think about time. Samuel listens for footsteps that might be Lucien's. He imagines the stall by the river one last time, the smell of bread, the easy ache in his arms after a long day's work. He tells himself he will stand up soon. He will walk out. He will sharpen his knife again. When the end comes, it is not dramatic. There is no final speech, no hand to hold. His breathing grows shallow, then stops. December 20th, 1871, passes like any other date on the calendar, unnoticed by anyone who loved him. Somewhere in the building, paperwork waits to be filled out. Somewhere else, a notebook tied with twine sits among other belongings, its pages already beginning to curl. Samuel Prince does not know that this is the moment when being sick becomes being useful to someone else. Samuel Prince's death is recorded without ceremony, December 20th, 1871. Cause, P. Tisses. The clerk's pen moves steadily, the ink dark and confident. A life that took 40 years to unfold is compressed into a single line that fits neatly between others. No one stands at the foot of the bed. No one argues the spelling of his name. By morning, the room he occupied is already needed for someone else. At Charity Hospital, death is not rare enough to interrupt routine. Bodies are washed, sheets changed, floors scrubbed. The smell of disinfectant sharpens, then fades. Personal effects are gathered and placed aside. Some are claimed quickly, some wait. Some are discarded when no one comes. Samuel's notebook is set on a shelf with others, its twine darkened by handling. The unsent note remains folded inside. His knife is wrapped in cloth. The blood-stained handkerchief is not saved. Down a corridor away from the ward, Dr. Henry D. Schmidt reviews the list of overnight deaths. He is methodical, known for his precision. His hair is neatly parted. His cuffs are clean. He does not rush. These, he says, tapping the page, will be suitable. An assistant nods. The word suitable carries no emotion. It does not need to. Dr. Schmidt is a pathologist, trained to see the body as a site of information. He prides himself on clarity, on order. His notes are written in careful script, each letter deliberate. He believes confusion is a moral failure. He also believes, deeply, that recognition from European academics is the measure of serious work. In his office sits a leather case of surgical tools, polished, arranged just so. He opens it the way another man might open a book. The collection must be complete, he says, more to himself than to anyone else. What follows is not hurried. After death, Samuel's skull is removed with practiced efficiency. The rest of the body is treated according to hospital custom, returned to the earth of New Orleans soil, likely in the same ground that has received thousands of others. There is no marker to distinguish him. There is no pause to consider consent. The skull is cleaned, measured, labeled. 5 feet 6 inches, the notes say. As if that detail might explain something essential. Dr. Schmidt does not speak Samuel's name aloud while he works. Names complicate things. Numbers do not. In the months that follow, crates are prepared. Each skull is wrapped, cataloged, assigned a place in a system that stretches beyond the hospital walls. This is not an isolated act. It is a pattern, repeated often enough to feel ordinary. Charity Hospital provides access. Germany provides prestige. Letters cross the Atlantic. To Emil Ludwig Schmidt in Leipzig, Henry D. Schmidt writes of specimens and opportunity, of contribution, of science advancing through cooperation. The tone is professional, almost eager. These materials will be of interest, he notes. Their provenance is reliable. In Leipzig, the reply is welcoming. The network is already established. Skulls arrive from many places, each one stripped of context and rich in potential for theory. Once unpacked, they are placed in drawers, shelves, cabinets. The air smells of dust and paper. Each edition strengthens an argument already decided. Samuel Prince becomes catalog number 804. In the ledger, his existence is reduced to columns: age, sex, place of origin, cranial measurements. There is no space for recipes, no line for promises, no mention of a stall by the river that never opens. Back in New Orleans, Lucien Baptiste waits longer than he means to. At first, he goes by the hospital every few days, asking at the desk, pretending he has business nearby. Each time, he is told there is no update. He'll be back, Lucien tells himself. He said so. Weeks pass, then months. Eventually, the visits stop. Lucien does not mark the moment when waiting turns into something else. He only knows that one day he walks past Carondelet Street without looking up. I can't pretend I know what it feels like to realize no one is coming back, but I recognize the way people adapt around a gap. They step around it. They build habits that don't require answers. Samuel's belongings are never claimed. The notebook disappears lost, discarded, or perhaps taken by someone who needs paper more than sentiment. The unsent note remains unread. The promise to cook a Sunday meal expires quietly. At Charity Hospital, Dr. Schmidt's work draws notice. His name appears in correspondence. He is invited to contribute further. Each success reinforces the logic that what he is doing is necessary, even virtuous. Did anyone hesitate while sealing the crate? There is no record of doubt. The paperwork is clean. The shipping documents are signed. Checked twice. Then once again. A crate is closed. A label affixed. The journey begins. On the other side of the ocean, Emil Ludwig Schmidt receives the shipment with satisfaction. He is not concerned with how the skulls were obtained. His interest lies in what they can be made to prove. He measures, compares, arranges. Differences are emphasized. Conclusions follow conveniently. In this system, Samuel Prince is not unique. He is interchangeable. His skull sits beside others, part of a series meant to demonstrate hierarchy. The logic is circular and cruel. Assumptions produce measurements. Measurements reinforce assumptions. Years turn into decades. The drawers remain. The catalog endures. Wars are fought. Cities change. The skulls stay where they are. Back in New Orleans, generations pass without knowing exactly who is missing. Stories thin out. Names are misremembered or lost. A branch of a family tree ends without explanation. This is how the silence is maintained, not through secrecy alone, but through normalization, through institutions that reward looking forward instead of back, through the absence of anyone whose job it is to ask why. Samuel Prince is not reported missing. His death is treated as closure, his usefulness reassigned. The system does not need him to be remembered, only recorded. I keep thinking about the moment when Samuel's skull was assigned a number, how easily that act traveled across borders and decades. It didn't require malice from everyone involved. It required something simpler. Indifference, dressed as professionalism. By the time the crates settle into their final places in Leipzig, the people who knew Samuel are gone or aging. Lucien Baptiste dies without ever learning what happened beyond the hospital walls. Nurse Delphine moves on to other wards, other patients, her memory of Samuel fading among many. Dr. Henry D. Schmidt continues his work until he no longer can. His papers remain. His doubts, if he had any, are not preserved. Catalog number 804 stays exactly where it is, waiting for a future that does not yet know how to look at it differently. And for a long time, no one does. The drawer is opened in Leipzig without ceremony. Metal slides against metal. The sound is small, ordinary, nothing like a revelation. Inside, rows of skulls sit in sequence, each marked, each accounted for, in a system that has outlived the people who built it. An archivist named Clara Weiss checks the number against a printed list. She wears cotton gloves, the kind meant to protect objects from fingerprints, not the other way around. Her training emphasizes care, order, neutrality. Number 804, she says aloud, confirming it to no one in particular. What changes in 2023 is not the object, but the language around it. The university no longer describes these remains as neutral scientific holdings. A phrase appears in internal documents, collected in an unethical context. It is an admission shaped carefully by lawyers and committees, but it is still an admission. Emails are sent across the Atlantic. In New Orleans, the message lands first on the desk of the city archaeologist. The wording is cautious, respectful. Leipzig proposes a return. For a moment, the past becomes active again. Within weeks, a repatriation committee forms. It is not a single office or authority, but a gathering of people who understand that this work cannot belong to one institution alone. Researchers, community leaders, clergy, city officials, each brings a different fear to the table. Dr. Eva Bayhem chairs the meetings. She is used to long rooms and longer conversations, to balancing precision with responsibility. She arrives carrying a thick binder, its tabs labeled in neat handwriting. She prefers paper. Paper leaves a trail. "We are not receiving artifacts," she says at the first meeting. "We are receiving people." Around the table, heads nod. No one argues, but the weight of what that means settles slowly. The task ahead is immense. Leipzig's records list 19 individuals. Some names are incomplete. Some spellings conflict. 2 entries lack names entirely. The committee decides early that guessing will not be an option. Certainty matters here more than speed. Days stretch into months. Dr. Bayhem and researcher Freddie Evans spend hours hunched over microfilm readers in public libraries, the machines humming softly as reels spin. Dust clings to their hands. Their eyes ache. "Here," Evans says one afternoon, tapping the glass. "This one matches. A death record from Charity Hospital. Aligns with a Leipzig entry. Age, date, cause." Another name slides into place. Each match brings a brief, almost guilty sense of relief. Samuel Prince stands out early. His file is unusually detailed. Born in Alexandria, Louisiana. Lived in New Orleans for 25 years. Occupation: cook. Address: 140 Carondelet Street. Height: 5 feet 6 inches. Died December 20th, 1871. He left a footprint, Baham says quietly, more than most. If you aren't his look. In the why, as the list of identified names grows, so does the awareness of who remains unidentified. 2 empty spaces persist, resistant to every search. They become their own kind of presence in the room. Meanwhile, the news begins to circulate beyond committee walls. Celeste Prince reads about it late one night, the glow of her laptop reflecting off the kitchen counter she has just wiped clean. She is 58, divorced, her son grown, and impatient with anything that smells like the past. She has a habit of listening to old jazz funeral recordings while she cleans, letting the music fill the space left by conversation. She clicks the article without much expectation. 19 skulls. Germany. New Orleans. Then she sees the name. Samuel Prince. Her breath catches. The name is familiar in the way a word can be familiar without meaning attached. She reaches for the family Bible kept in a drawer beneath the counter. Its leather cover worn soft. Inside, a torn page lists surnames in fading ink. Under Prince, there is a gap. Her grandmother, Miss Odette, used to tap that page with one finger. "We had people before we had papers," Odette would say. Then she would change the subject. Celeste reads the article again, slower. Cook, Carondelet Street. 40 years old. "This could be him," she whispers, though she doesn't yet know what him means. The committee debates DNA testing. The option is there. It would provide clarity, lineage, proof. It would also require cutting into the remains, taking something more. Michael Gazinski, the city archaeologist, speaks carefully when the topic arises. "We will not take from them again," he says. "Not for our certainty." The decision is not unanimous, but it holds. Archival research will be the method. Names will be restored through records, not extraction. For Celeste, the decision is both relief and frustration. She wants proof. She also understands restraint. If we don't claim him, who will? She says during a public forum, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Dr. Baham listens. She knows the committee cannot promise answers it does not have. "I can't pretend this will be clean," Baham says afterward. "But we will be honest." As preparations move forward, Leipzig begins packing the remains for return. Each skull is placed into a container designed for transport, cushioned, labeled. The work is meticulous. Respectful now, in a way it was not before. Clara Weiss oversees the process, checking each number against the list. She pauses at 804, longer than necessary, then corrects herself and moves on. In New Orleans, plans are made for a memorial that can hold many truths at once. An interfaith service is chosen because the faiths of the dead are not recorded. No assumption feels safe. 17 names are finalized. 2 are left blank, intentionally. Celeste attends every open meeting she can. She listens more than she speaks. At home, she searches old addresses street by street, scrolling through maps, trying to imagine Samuel's world. Her son watches her one evening and shakes his head. "Why does this matter?" he asks. "He died 150 years ago." Celeste closes the laptop and looks at him. "Because the theft didn't end," she says. "It just got quiet," and really sighed. But the best interessen, "I can't pretend I know what it's like to reach backward across generations for someone you've never met, but I recognize the pull of unfinished stories. They don't loosen their grip just because time passes." When the remains arrive in New Orleans, there are no cameras at the airport. The handoff is private. Containers are moved carefully, as if sudden motion might disturb something beyond bone. Dr. Baham stands nearby, hands clasped. She watches the labels, the numbers giving way to names. "Samuel Prince," she says aloud, testing the sound. "It feels different here." The audience believes this is the end of the story, the return, the righting of a wrong. But as the committee members know, bringing someone home does not explain how they were taken. It does not tell you who signed the forms, who benefited, who learned to look away. The past has stepped into the present. It has not finished speaking, and the drawer, once opened, cannot be closed the same way again. The work changes tone once the remains are home. What felt abstract in archives becomes heavier when the evidence occupies space in the same city where the theft began. Boxes sit on tables. Names are spoken in rooms where those names were once erased. The past no longer feels distant enough to study politely. Michael Gazinski spreads documents across a conference table, aligning them the way he aligns excavation grids. He measures twice, speaks once. Every step must hold up later, under scrutiny. "This didn't start in Germany," he says. tapping the earliest record. It started here. The chain becomes clearer as the committee reconstructs it piece by piece. Charity hospital death logs, internal pathology notes, shipping manifests that never mention consent. The skulls did not vanish. They were processed, routed, approved. Samuel Prince was never missing in the way people imagine missing. His body likely remained in New Orleans soil, buried according to the hospital's customs for the poor. What traveled was only his skull cleaned, labeled, detached from the rest of him with intention. That realization shifts the moral center of the story. The crime was not distance. It was division. Celeste Prince sits through these meetings with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Each new detail sharpens something inside her. So someone decided, she says at one point, voice low, that part of him was more valuable than the rest. No one contradicts her. In Leipzig's archive records, Samuel's entry is sparse but precise. Height, measurements, origin. The numbering system reveals its own logic. Skulls grouped by region, then by perceived usefulness. Number 804 sits in a cluster sent during the same period. Was he chosen? Celeste asks. Or just there? Gozinski answers honestly. Available, he says. That's usually the answer. The committee commissions memorial vessels for the burial handcrafted containers designed not to display remains, but to protect them. Each vessel will carry a name, age, and date of death. Symbols from West African traditions are chosen deliberately, a way of restoring connection where documentation failed. Watching the vessels being prepared, Celeste feels a flare of anger she did not expect. The care is beautiful. The intention is good. But it comes late. What happened to his things? She asked Dr. Baham one afternoon. When he went into the hospital, Baham pauses. She has learned to respect questions that don't have satisfying answers. We don't know, she says. Records don't track personal belongings well, especially when no one claims them. Celeste imagines the notebook grease-stained, tied with twine set aside, then forgotten, thrown away, used for scrap. The idea hurts more than she expects. I can't pretend I know what it's like to grieve an object you never saw, but I understand how loss multiplies when even small traces disappear. As the reconstruction deepens, the committee uncovers correspondence that shows how normalized the practice was. Language repeats itself. Specimen, material, exchange. No one writes man. No one writes cook. In Leipzig, Clara Weiss assists with follow-up inquiries. She provides scans, translations, context. She does her job well. Still, Celeste can't help noticing how practiced the system is at explaining itself. This was standard for the time. Clara says during a video call, careful with her words. Celeste leans forward. So was a lot of harm, she replies. The room goes quiet. The committee debates how much to share publicly. Transparency matters, but so does restraint. There is a risk of turning suffering into spectacle, of making the story about institutional repentance instead of human cost. Dr. Baham insists on grounding every revelation in a person. If it doesn't change how someone feels, she says, it doesn't belong. The audience learns that Samuel's skull was measured repeatedly, his head used to support theories that were already decided. He was not studied to be understood. He was studied to be placed. Another assumption collapses here. The audience believed the injustice ended once the skull crossed the ocean. Instead, the theft was continuous, reinforced every time a student opened a drawer, and learned the wrong lesson from it. Celeste feels the weight of being asked implicitly to accept the committee's authority over Samuel's remains. She trusts their intentions, but the parallel is uncomfortable. You're deciding for him now, she says to Gozinski one evening, after a long meeting. Just like they did. Gozinski doesn't flinch. That's why we move slowly, he says. And why we listen. Understand is a valid. The decision not to perform DNA testing resurfaces as pressure builds. Journalists ask about certainty. Viewers want proof. Baham holds firm. Certainty has a cost, she says. We are not paying it with their bodies. Behind the scenes, legal clearances advance. Forms are printed, stamped, filed. Bureaucracy becomes an unlikely ally, ensuring nothing happens without record this time. In one of the quieter moments, Celeste walks past the vessels lined up for engraving. She runs her fingers lightly over the blank surface that will soon bear Samuel's name. The material is cool, smooth. He was real, she says, to no one. Yes, Baham answers, standing beside her. The reconstruction does not fill in everything. There is still no spouse listed, no children named, no obituary voice to quote. Samuel's personhood remains partial, stitched together from fragments. But the fragments matter. The committee prepares the final roster, 17 names, 2 marked simply as unknown. The choice is deliberate. They refuse to invent closure. As burial plans finalize, Celeste understands something she didn't at the beginning. Home is not a place that erases what happened. It is a place that remembers it honestly. The question shifts again, pressing forward instead of back. Now that the process is visible, documented, undeniable, what happens next? Who else is waiting in drawers, measured and mislabeled? The story is no longer about what Germany held. It is about what New Orleans allowed and what it is willing to confront. The vessels are sealed. Names engraved. Dates checked one last time. Catalog number 804 disappears from use, replaced by letters carved deep enough to last. Samuel Prince, 40 years old, cook, and still, in ways that matter, unfinished. The city prepares the memorial with a careful kind of hesitation, as if too much confidence might tempt fate. Chairs are arranged, then rearranged. Programs are printed, revised, printed again. No one wants to get this wrong, because wrong has already been done. At Dillard University's chapel, the memorial vessels are placed in a line at the front of the room. Each one is handmade, weighty, dignified. Names are engraved cleanly, without flourish. 17 vessels carry words. 2 remain marked only by space. Samuel Prince's vessel sits near the center. Celeste arrives early. She takes a seat close enough to read the engraving without leaning forward. Her hands rest in her lap, fingers worrying the edge of a folded tissue she hasn't yet kneaded. She reads the name again, silently. Samuel Prince, 40. December 20th, 1871. For the first time, she understands something she didn't expect. Naming him does not soften the loss. It sharpens it. Around her, people gather: community members, scholars, clergy, musicians. Some are here because they worked on the case. Others came because the story reached them and would not let go. The room smells faintly of polished wood and flowers. An interfaith service was chosen because certainty would have been dishonest. No one knows which prayers Samuel heard as a child, or whether he prayed at all. So the memorial makes room instead of decisions. When Dr. Eva Baham steps to the podium, she does not begin with institutions or timelines. We are here because people were taken, she says simply, and because taking did not end with death. There is no applause. The words settle quietly. A rabbi speaks of dignity. An imam speaks of return. A Buddhist representative speaks of harm that moves forward until interrupted. Each voice adds weight, not resolution. Celeste listens, but her attention keeps returning to the vessel. She imagines Samuel's hands, the way they must have moved confidently over cutting boards, the way they would have tested heat, adjusted seasoning. She imagines him writing in the notebook she now knows will never be found. I can't pretend I know what it feels like to grieve someone you never met, but I recognize the ache of realizing how much was taken before you had the chance to know it. When the names are read aloud, one by one, the room changes. 17 lives re-enter the air. Each name is followed by a pause, not long enough to become ceremonial, but long enough to be felt. Samuel Prince. Celeste exhales. The name sounds sturdier spoken aloud, less like a ghost. When the reader reaches the end of the list, the final 2 spaces are acknowledged plainly. 2 individuals remain unidentified. No euphemism, no apology. The absence is allowed to stand. After the service, the procession forms outside. The day is warm, heavy with that familiar New Orleans humidity that presses close to the skin. Musicians gather at the front, instruments catching the light. The first notes of the jazz funeral rise, low and steady. The rhythm is both celebration and indictment. This city knows how to hold both at once. As the procession moves, Celeste walks alongside strangers who feel suddenly like kin. The music swells, then lifts. People on the sidewalk stop to watch. Some bow their heads. Some clap in time. A few wipe their eyes, without knowing exactly why. Near the cemetery, Celeste's son walks beside her, hands shoved into his pockets. "I still don't get it," he says quietly. "Why this matters so much." She looks at him, then back at the vessels being carried ahead of them. "Because what they did to him didn't stop when he died," she says. "And if we don't say that out loud, it never really stops." End quote. He doesn't answer. But he doesn't argue either. At the burial site near the Hurricane Katrina Memorial, the ground has been prepared. The choice of location was deliberate. Another place where people were abandoned. Another chapter of the same story. One by one, the vessels are lowered. Each movement is slow, intentional, no rush, no spectacle. When it is Samuel's turn, Celeste steps closer without realizing she's moved. The vessel passes within arm's reach. She does not touch it. She doesn't need to. A trumpet plays a softer line now. The sound bends, lingers. Dr. Bahem stands nearby, watching the faces of the crowd more than the ceremony itself. This is the moment she worried about, the point where dignity risks becoming symbolic, where institutions congratulate themselves and move on. But then she hears people repeating the names, quietly, to each other, testing them, carrying them away. That matters. Celeste remains after most people have left. She waits until the ground is smoothed, until the workers step back. The space feels newly occupied, unsettled but present. She thinks again of her grandmother, of the way Miss Odette used to close the Bible with both hands, firmly, as if sealing something inside. That night, at home, Celeste opens the Bible to the torn page. The ink is faded, the paper thin. She places it carefully on the table. Her son watches from the doorway as she uncaps a pen, tests it on scrap paper, then brings it back. She writes, slowly, deliberately. Samuel Prince. The letters are not perfect. They don't match the older handwriting. She leaves them anyway. "This doesn't prove anything," her son says. Celeste nods. "No," she agrees. But it refuses forgetting. "I can't pretend that naming the dead repairs what was broken. It doesn't return stolen years or heal every wound. But I can see how truth, once spoken, changes the shape of the present." The memorial does not close the story. It complicates it. 17 names now belong to the city again. 2 still do not. And Samuel Prince, once catalog number 804, is no longer just evidence of what was done, but proof of what it cost. The burial ground near the Hurricane Katrina Memorial looks ordinary the morning after the ceremony. Dew clings to the grass. A plastic ribbon left from crowd control flutters weakly against a post. The city has already begun to move on, because it always does. The 19 are now beneath the surface, placed carefully, deliberately, in a location chosen for what it remembers. The committee stands together for a few minutes before dispersing, each person unsure how long it is appropriate to linger. Dr. Eva Baham stays the longest. She walks the line where the vessels were lowered, reading the names again, quietly. When she reaches the end, she pauses at the 2 blank markers. "We're not done," she says, more promise than statement. The work continues, even without cameras. That was always the agreement. The repatriation was a beginning, not a conclusion. In the weeks that follow, emails resume, phone calls return. Dr. Baham and Freddie Evans divide tasks the way they always have. One focused on archival outreach, the other on community notices. They draft letters inviting anyone with family ties to Charity Hospital in the 1870s to come forward. The wording is careful. No pressure, no guarantees. Michael Gozinski files the final legal documents, his desk stacked with folders that mark closure only in a bureaucratic sense. He places one last stamp on a page, then sets the stamp down and doesn't immediately reach for the next task. "We did right by them," he says, to no one in particular. Across the city, Celeste Prince stands in a stationery store, staring at a rack of pens. She has already written Samuel's name into the family Bible. But she keeps thinking about the act itself, the testing of ink, the steadiness of her hand. She chooses a pen with a fine point, then buys a second one, just in case. At home, she opens the Bible again, running her fingers over the page where the ink is still slightly raised. Her son watches her from the table. "You really think he's ours?" he asks. Celeste considers the question. "I think he's real," she says. "And I think that's enough to start." She adds a date beneath the name, the year of the burial. not to mark an ending, but to mark a return. In the months after the ceremony, small things shift. A local school requests materials for a lesson on the repatriation. A medical ethics class asks Dr. Bayham to speak. The story refuses to stay contained. At Charity Hospital's successor institution, administrators meet to review historical practices. The language is careful, but the acknowledgement is explicit. Harm occurred here. That sentence exists now in official minutes. One afternoon, Dr. Bayham receives an email from a woman in Mississippi who believes her great-great-grandmother may be one of the unnamed two. The evidence is thin. Dates don't quite align. But the inquiry is respectful. Hopeful. "We will look," Bayham replies. She means it. The two unnamed are no longer treated as leftovers. Their status is listed plainly in every document. Still missing. The phrasing matters. It keeps the door open. Celeste returns to the burial site alone one evening. The light is low, the air thick with summer heat. She brings nothing with her. She doesn't need to. She stands where Samuel rests and imagines him at 40, strong enough to lift heavy pots, precise enough to adjust seasoning by instinct. She thinks about the notebook again, the recipes that never traveled. "I'm sorry," she says aloud, surprised by her own voice. There is no answer. She didn't expect one. I can't pretend that burial restores what was divided. Samuel's body was split across continents, across intentions, across centuries. Bringing him home did not reassemble him. It acknowledged the damage. As weeks turn into months, inquiries slow, but do not stop. Some are hopeful. Some are angry. A few accuse the committee of reopening wounds. Dr. Bayham listens to all of it. "Wounds don't reopen," she says during a tense community meeting. "They ache because they were never treated." Behind the scenes, Leipzig implements new protocols for its collections. Drawers are reviewed. Labels revised. Language shifts. It is not redemption. It is record. Celeste's son begins asking different questions. About his grandmother. About the city. About why certain stories were never taught to him. "I didn't know," he says one night. "Frustration and something else mixed together." "That's part of it," Celeste replies. Not knowing was built in. The final committee meeting of the year is brief. Progress is noted. Next steps outlined. There is no applause when it ends. As people gather their things, Dr. Bayham closes her binder, the tabs worn from use. She pauses before standing. "They trusted us," she says. "Even without choosing us." No one disagrees. The two unnamed remain without names. That fact does not fade. It sits alongside the others. A reminder that repair is uneven, incomplete by nature. Samuel Prince's name, however, holds. It appears now in places it never did before, in programs, in lesson plans, in a Bible on a kitchen table. Celeste visits the burial site one last time before winter. She notices how the ground has settled, how the grass has begun to reclaim the disturbed earth. She kneels, presses her palm briefly to the soil, feeling its coolness. When she stands, she brushes dirt from her hand and looks once more at the markers. 17 engraved, 2 blank. She doesn't turn away from the blanks. The city moves, buses pass. Somewhere nearby, a trumpet practices scales, the notes uneven but persistent. Samuel Prince is home. Not whole, not resolved, but named. And that name, written carefully and spoken aloud, remains where it was once removed, held now by people who know what it costs to get it back. The music fades first. What remains are smaller sounds, the scrape of chairs being folded, footsteps on concrete, the dull thud of earth settling back into itself. The vessels are no longer visible, but their names linger in the air, repeated softly by people who don't want to be the first to forget. At the burial site, 17 names sit complete. 2 spaces do not. Celeste Prince stands a few steps back, the family Bible tucked under her arm. She doesn't open it. She already knows what's written there. When she closes her eyes, she can still see the letters forming, one careful stroke at a time. "Samuel Prince," she whispers, not as a question. "I can't pretend that this ending feels finished." It doesn't. Returning bones does not return time. Calling a name does not rebuild a life. What it does is interrupt a long habit of looking away. Somewhere, in another archive, there are more numbers like 804, More drawers, more labels that once passed for knowledge. This story ends not because the work is done, but because it has reached the living. The camera does not linger on the grave. It moves instead to the roster posted nearby, where the names are listed cleanly. At the bottom, 2 lines remain blank. They are not erased. They are left open. Celeste closes the Bible gently, as if sealing something fragile. The cover makes a soft sound when it meets the table later that night, final but not heavy. Outside, the city keeps breathing. Buses hiss. Someone laughs. Life insists on itself. Samuel Prince is no longer catalog number 804. He is not whole, not fully known, but he is claimed. And the echo of his name, once taken and measured, now belongs to the people who chose to say it out loud, knowing it would never be enough, and saying it anyway.